Hello, YouTube. If everything goes well, you can hear this. Otherwise, you will upload the recording later. Actually, that's a good point. I should probably figure out how I can monitor the chat. Meanwhile, isn't there a way to pop it out? Pop out chat. Yes, there is. Hello, YouTube. If everything goes well, you can hear this. Otherwise, let's mute this one. Nothing like first-time setups. Let me put this guy here. Alrighty, so I think Afam had some requests for order, right? He wanted to review the JSON ones first. Is that right?
Yes.
Which one in particular? This one here, the exposed line number and byte?
There's three of them. So the date time, exposed line number, and option to support trailing.
So what was the third one?
The add try date time.
This one here, right? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any order in between them? Otherwise, you just go through them.
We should be able to get to all of them, so it doesn't matter.
All right. All right. So walk us through this one here.
So we throw a JsonReader exception today, which contains the line number and byte position line for where the error token or error string exists. If someone wants to create your own custom exception or want to do some custom logic based on where the invalid JSON occurred, they would want to have these values as well. So we want to expose them to the user. An example of that is in dependency models, where they're throwing a format exception based on schema validation. So it's not about that the JSON itself is invalid, but the fact that they've expected a string and they got an int or something. So they want to throw the line number, return the line number and byte position line for where the invalid JSON occurred. Invalid schema of the JSON that occurred.
Is the reader the right place to do that, or the state object?
So I don't see a need for on the state today. I do see a need for it on the reader. And the reason why I don't want to put it on state is because if someone has not done the state, they have the entire payload, or they're not dealing with asynchronous, it seems unnecessary to force them to use the state just for this purpose. So I found it having it on both places, but I would rather have it on UTF8 reader than state if they're only taking one.
Okay.
And that's one of the questions I had is, do we want to expose it from both places preemptively, or
is there anything that's already in the state of being public in the reader type, but not public in the state?
Sure, like this. Also, the value. Sure. I'll consider that.
Then this seems consistent.
Okay. Again, I have no objections to adding it to the state as well. If someone requires it or someone needs it. I would imagine the scenario could extend to async or scenarios where you have incomplete data. But I didn't want to add it until someone asked. Or I saw a need for it specifically.
And if somebody grabs the state and then makes a new reader and they read this property, it will immediately have what the state had in it.
Yeah.
So they have a way of restoring from the captured state to get the data.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just not. It requires more words than they might like.
Two questions. One, do we expose anywhere the total offset information as well as line and byte offset online?
We have byte consumed.
Okay.
And actually on the state, it tracks the total whatever you consume so far.
And how are we tracking the line number? Are we doing Unicode or just CRLF? Or?
It's just that.
Okay, so if a user was to open this in an editor, the line number that they see in the editor might differ from the line number that we're giving here.
Because there's different new lines that in Unicode are separate.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, is it worth exposing the total offset in the JsonReader exception then as part of this? That way users can, no matter what line encoding their editor is using, can find the appropriate location.
You have byte system on the reader.
I mean, on the exception.
Oh, on the exception.
Just to complete rounding out this contract. Because if we're only counting R up, whack R, whack in, then I could open up a JSON file in my editor and find it elsewhere.
How would you able to use the information to find it in a text editor?
The total,
yeah, if I give you, you have read 1,000 bytes.
Because most text editors tell you the total character offset.
From the beginning of the
file.
They usually collapse 2 character new lines into 1 character new line.
Not the ones that I've used.
I've never seen one that tells you what the absolute position in your stream is.
Nope, that's for example. I'm pretty sure we have heard this as well.
Okay, I want to verify. But other than that, so you're saying add that to the JsonReader exception and also expose it? Well, you already exposed it, but.
Yeah. But the only thing that I'm concerned about is that, we parse the file and we say the new line is here, and then you open it in an editor and it says it's elsewhere. And then you say, oh, I'm going to go to line, 800 because that's what the exception said and now I can't find it.
Tokens are more than 1 character.
So at the beginning, because if it was at the end, you already confused it. So it was possible.
I mean, that means that for the, I want to report that I found a string, or that I expected a string, but I got an int. They're reporting the end of the string, not the, they need to actually snap the state before they read the next token.
I should, for valid JSON, if you're valid JSON, you say, oh, I should say that int, and you read past the string, and now you're like, oh, look, this is, it will be at the end of the token. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
No.
VS Code doesn't show it directly in the info, but if you select text, it tells you how many individual characters you selected.
If the need here is to be able to ask the reader, where am I, so I can report a schema violation. It seems like by the time they know that there's a schema violation, the reader's telling them where they will be next and not where the schema violation occurred.
Yeah.
So now I'll just question, is this API really fulfilling their need, or is it making them do a lot of work to almost fulfill their need?
The problem is, today, they don't get any of this information. Right? So it is, the only thing that they have to do is subtract value span or something else, or they'll have to do more work, but at least some information is exposed to them.
Well, the line number will be wrong, and the byte position in the line will be wrong. So if you think of a standard pretty printed property bag, what they want is line 3 position 12, and what will give them is line 4 position 4.
Right.
Which means that they need to snap it they need to ask for this right before they call move next every time, which means that this becomes expensive for what they want.
That's fair.
Maybe the exception should also be not only exposing the current reader position, but the...
Well, this isn't the exception.
Right.
This is, no exception was thrown, but they want to say, I was here in the document when I wanted an int and you gave me a string.
So the reader should expose the beginning of the current token that it was processing. That's all.
I think
what you're asking for?
I think that seems very reasonable, because that seems also very well defined, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to picture what the code it is that they would need to write to do this. It seems like they would need to grab byte position and line number, then call whatever move next is called, And then if they didn't like the token after they called move next, then throw the previous where they saved these values. But ideally, they would only ever need to ask for these values after they had a schema violation.
Right.
But they need to read them ahead of time. And if that's the way that makes sense to do it, fine. It's just a little awkward that you're reporting. You're not reporting where you were. You're reporting where you will be. You're reporting where the reading will start.
Right.
And I mean, it can be documented that way, which means if you care for like their scenario, you have to always read it early. It's just.
Well, I think in practice it probably doesn't matter too much because, for the most part you do it for diagnostic purposes, right? So you get within the vicinity of where you want the error to be, right? I think if you really want to build an editor that does something nice, line number and position is not going to do much for you anyway, because in order to get it squiggly, you would have to know the length of the token, for example.
Yeah, but telling you like, here's where, like, this is where in the document I expected a string or a number or whatever. Right now it will be reporting. If you're like, I expected a string, and you look and like, but there's a quote here. It's a property name. Like, what do you mean you expected a string?
Right.
Because it's always reporting off by one token. It's like right now on Linux we report exceptions off by 3 lines. It's really annoying.
Yeah, no, that one I can see.
So you're right in the scenario that's motivating this API, where they're doing schema validation. This will actually give you the wrong information because it'll give you one off by one. But in general, for diagnostic purposes, adding this for public properties for the state of the JsonReader is still useful, I think.
Yeah, I think it's still useful. I think the question is, should we also be exposing start of previous token or something like that? That way users can say, here's where the reader is now when it found the exception. Here's where it was before. And now I'm able to decide, do I want to say that the error was a schema violation and therefore the error was here, or do I want to say, like, I encountered an invalid character and the error is here?
Yeah. Or tracking both the previous start of token and the current start of token is a lot of work. And I don't know if you want to take that performance regression.
So my question would be,
is it actually a lot of work, or do you just need to update it after move next?
No, because you can't do it after move next, right?
Well, why not? Because after move next, you should be at the start of the next token. And then I guess you would do it, you would do it, no, you could still do it on move next. You would just say on move next, then start of previous token is current position. And then the user processes the text, and before they call move next, they will have encountered this error. And the reader would be past move next, but before the next token at that point.
If after move next, you update the here was my previous token to something that you now have found now, how do you know what the previous token was? How do you know what the schema validation occurred?
Well, like it will start at 0, 0.
Yeah.
Then you'll say, give me the current text. And so start will be 0, 0. You pull out the token.
Yeah.
And if you don't have encounter an error, then the user calls move next. You'll update to the start of the next token. And the reader and the token start will be in sync.
Okay, so before you call move next, you have token start. After you have move next, you update the previous token start.
Yes.
But now when the user says, I've done move next, I see it's a string. Let me tell you,
Yeah. So I think that if you want to convey that it's where the next read is going to start, you should just build that into the thing on the reader. Because I would look at this and I would see if I've called move, I would expect line number to be where the token started instead of where the token. I mean, none of the tokens can actually straddle a line, but I would expect the byte position of line to be where the token started instead of where the token ends. Oh, because you'll proactively skip past white space, so you can be reporting on the wrong line because that's where the next token will start. So I think, next line number, next byte position of line, or like somehow working in the notion that it's about the work you're about to do instead of the work you've already done.
Right. So is the file for it to be different from the JsonReader exception? Because JsonReader exception
JsonReader exception knows exactly where the file is.
Right.
So it's a specific.
It's happening before you get to the next token.
Yeah. Because you're throwing it with like, I'm at this byte in this string when I saw an illegal new line, right? So
alternative is next. You have this thing called current depth, and that also moves past the token once you read. So should this be called current line number, current byte length, position line? Because the reader has already moved past. So what's the current? It's different from what it was before you had read.
Maybe. I mean, like largely it'll need documentation, but
right.
It feels like current depth is the reader has into this state, and line number is about what the next token is going to be. Like you actually don't even know that that's where the next token is going to be, because if you're in a sequence thing and if you are doing the multi-load, all that you know is you finished reading here.
Yeah.
The next call can still skip a bunch of white space before it finds the next token. So this actually doesn't tell you anything.
Right. So the only thing it tells you is current line number.
Right. So I think this is actually useful. Like it's useful in the final state where you can be deterministic about everything, but in the general case, you can do nothing with this data.
But to Emo's point, is the general vicinity of where the error occurred, or where the schema invalidation occurred.
Yeah, I would not go as far as Jeremy just said. I wouldn't say it's useless, right? I mean, if you parse a 4 megabyte document, I mean, even if the error is not precisely where you would expect it, it's still better than just telling you I blew up somewhere, right?
I mean, I guess a lot of it would come down to the context of whatever the person who's using this gives. Like if they say, I saw this property and I expected it to be a string and it was a number, then they told you the name of the property they're looking at and now the approximate location. The problem I have is where it says like if it just says schema violation occurred at line 17, byte position 7, and it really occurred either, later because there's a bunch of white space or on a previous line because it was the previous token. Like, it's very misleading when you're looking at something and you're like, this looks legal, but the error was actually from somewhere else. So then with the multi-segment read, this could be any arbitrary amount of white space before the token that they were upset about.
Right. So even though the motivating factor was the schema validation, and I don't have a good solution for that where we're actually doing like giving the exact where the error occurred or invalid schema occurred. Like I said, I think as part of diagnostic information for where is the reader at currently, this information is still valid.
Because I just worked somewhere in there that
now whether they decide to use the exception message just to get the general vicinity of where the invalid schema occurred for the user, they have to go up to the caller who's calling the API. But at least I've given something around the state of the reader itself. So they're not like flying.
Fair enough. Anyway, so my feedback is somewhere in there. I look at these names and I feel that this is where the last successful call to move started, and this is actually where the last successful call to move ended.
Right.
So I would try and work that into the name somehow, but it definitely needs documentation.
Right. Yeah. Now, one of the good points you brought up is the difference was how do we decide giving useful information to the people who want to throw an exception, and especially the next line number, the correct line number, correct byte to position line. So that's something I have to investigate offline. I don't want to modify this API for that scenario. Because either way, we're not getting the right precise information anyway. I'm fine with specifying current line number, current byte position, but I don't want to do it next because that's equally misleading.
Okay.
If you want to change that, that's fine. schema suggestion?
Sorry, I was just taking notes regarding which part.
Renaming it to current line number, current byte position in line, or can we just leave it as is, or
I mean, naming
wise?
wise?
Should be gone.
Well, I think the first thing we need to figure out is the design really what we want. So I was just writing down what we just discussed, that we are generally fine with the exception, but the problem is that if you wanted to use it for schema validation and we expose it on the reader, then the problem is, on the state, the problem is that we don't have the correct position that people will likely expect. So I think that's something we probably want to go offline, think about it, and then come back to an updated proposal. And then depending on what these byte positions represent, yeah, we should make sure that the naming makes sense. I'm not sure that current adds much, because if you expose them, it's kind of implied that it's, of course it's the current line number. The question is just what current means in this context, right?
Right. Do you not think it's valuable to have these APIs regardless of the discussion of having precise positions for invalid schema cases?
No, I think it is.
Anyway.
No, I think it is, but as you just said, right, you should probably write the doc that you would put on move next or on the actual line number and byte position APIs to describe what the behavior is, and then we can say, is that what we want? Is that something people can likely reason about?
Right.
So let me just paste in what I just said.
And I think if nothing else, exposing just these would allow users to track the current token position themselves if they needed to.
Modular detail.
What is it, what?
Modular detail. It works fine in the case where you have only the one buffer, but in the async case, it will tell you the last time it read a valid token where it stopped at the end of the cycle. So if you have pages and pages and pages of white space, it'll be wrong, or comments, or whatever. So what you want is the next token after this position. It's up to you to figure out where the next token started after this position. So that algorithm would always be right. It's just a little loosey-goosey with accuracy.
All right. Now copy and pasting happens. Oh my God, I'm not even signed in. This is how unprepared I am.
And we're recording this.
Everybody knows that as of that time, yep.
Yeah, but I guess it's async, right? So it's not like live stream.
Yeah. And the token's only good for like 2 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, if you can guess my password, more power to you.
Yeah, I approve of the password link.
All right, so let me just update this to say API. What is this? Needs to work.
Okay.
All right, next one. You signed in with another. Jesus Christ. Okay, fine. God knows why you have to refresh that page, but hey.
In case there was data that you was secret, and now you can see.
I guess.
So the API is on the second post. The thread.
Hit page down, Emo.
So I was just reading it, what it's actually saying. Okay, so what do you want to handle? You want to handle trading comma?
Trading comma. Yeah.
Well, if we want to parse any of our own JSON files, we need this.
That's why it's required.
Yeah, so Austin, you and I talked about this, I think, last week, and one of the things that I had suggested is I wonder if we maybe need a loose versus strict option on the JsonReader, where loose would basically say allow comments, allow trailing commas, basically just try to do the right thing, even if it means that you're effectively guessing. And strict would say, no, you actually have to follow the RFC. Would it make sense to introduce this and then have a bunch of these other little sub-properties hidden underneath that, or at least rolled up into that?
I don't know if it makes sense. I mean, other people can chime in. To basically have a catch all. We accept everything because I want users to explicitly opt into things that they're breaking.
If you want an accelerator for loose, I think that would just be JsonReader options.loose as a static accelerator.
Okay, sure, yeah, that
JsonReader options.strict, aka default.
Yeah, just I can just imagine, several such properties being added in the future, and it would be nice if the developer is reading something like a config file, if they could just do a one-shot, like you said, and say, allow absolutely everything.
Oh yeah. That once we have reached that threshold, I don't know if we have with this property, but once we have reached the threshold, maybe we should add it, yeah. But I wouldn't remove the explicit opt-in options.
No, this would be additive.
Right, so it would be to make a static property on JsonReader option called loose, right? That is everything in the friendliest mode. And then optionally also have one called strict that returns default, right? We're defaulting to standard compliance.
Any suggestion on what other things loose would include other than comments, trailing commas? Because things like, there's a lot of things that Uniform accepts. For example, single quoted characters, which we rejected, single quoted strings. Would all of those go into that category as well, or
essentially it would be as options get added in JsonReader option, loose is always the most relaxed, and strict is always the default.
Right.
But so strict is everything RFC compliant, and then loose is all optional things available, and then users could individually create options that have in between if they wanted.
Yeah. Right.
Which probably they wouldn't. Probably they'll just call loose, but making it be like we're gonna have the individual switches on things, and then really it's for things like if you want to stop at the comments and read the comments, like I would expect loose would be skip comments instead of allow comments, so it would just move past them by default.
Right.
Loose would be skip comments. So anything where we get more than just a Boolean state, strict versus loose doesn't cover all your scenarios. So then you'd want to go make a custom one. Yeah.
Okay, sure. And I didn't really want to, hijack the conversation here. I was just wondering if this would be the appropriate time to introduce it so that we could get people onto that convenience property.
Let me file an issue for it, and we can review it.
Yeah.
Going forward.
It'd probably be strict and lax instead of strict and loose.
But they add both.
Once we're adding lax, adding strict just gives the API symmetry, even though what it would do is return default.
Okay.
Essentially, it's just self-documenting what default is. So your code reads better of being JsonReader option strict. So for this one, where we're just adding a bool, I think that's all we were doing was adding a bool.
Yeah.
I can't think of any time that we would ever that allow trailing commas with gaining third option. So and I mean, I guess the only thing would be if it would be comma options allow redundant or something like, so that if you had second comma third, then it's like, oh, that's not illegal, even though the spec says it is. But I think that's fine to make it legal. Yeah.
The other question is, let's say how you have start out array over there. What if you had a comma after the end of the array? JSON.NET closed currently because your game the say node's done. Why are you giving me a new comma?
I mean, a comma there makes. Yeah, I think that was the point. It's like if you have it, you could theoretically have an option that says allow useless commas, but at that point, there's no real reason, at least that I can think of. The primary use case for this is that I can think of at least, and that always comes up in the C# language discussions where they start adding trailing commas, is it makes it really nice to view in diffs, because then you're not modifying the previous line. I want to change the JSON spec and make the trailing comma be mandatory. I think trailing commas are the best.
Right, after third is a comma. That's trailing comma.
Yeah.
But then after the array ends, it is a comma. That's also considered trailing comma if the array was embedded in an object. But added on a root object, like a root array.
That comma there is the same as if there's a 3 there. It's illegal.
Yeah. I think it becomes the case of like, does this make any kind of semantic sense, or is this just like completely out of the blue where it should be?
Okay.
Like having it at the end makes sense semantically to make it line up with everything else, etc. But just having like an additional comma after that, you would expect the parser to say there has to be data before this comma.
I mean, is it fair to say trailing commas are only legal if the immediate containing construct allows for multiple items?
Yeah.
I think that's the most strenuous definition I can think of. And in that case, I would agree that the bool seems reasonable, right? Because that's anything else would be crazy.
Right. So the only thing moving off a bool, and this is just thinking out loud so we can decide we don't care, is if we wanted to say that second, comma, third was legal, that you had too many commas between two elements, that seems like a thing that I'm fine not supporting, but that would be the only thing that I could see moving the Boolean from a Boolean into a tri-state.
What would the use case be for that be, other than like a typo?
Typo, bad pasting, code, or things doing injected writing. So, like, you wrote a thing, you thought you should end it with a comma, the thing embedding you in also wrote a comma because it thought you wouldn't.
So generally speaking, our bar for features and options is
whether or not James has it.
Near stuff.
Yeah.
The fact that near stuff doesn't support it, it doesn't make us possible.
Right. And again, I'm fine not supporting it. That would be the only thing that I could think of that would turn this Boolean into a tri-state. Right. And I'm fine saying we don't care.
Well, I mean, you could imagine that you handle arrays differently from properties, right? But I don't think that's very likely either.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So I think in general, I think the idea of the trailing comma is specifically to allow people that generate effectively lists not to especially handle the last item, right? So in that sense, the duplicate trailing comma makes no sense. Like, your code is fucked. And I think in general, like when you say you optimize for copy and paste errors, then you go down the HTML route where any human error that is conceivable, you try to fix in the parser, right? At that point, I think you are losing. So I would say let's just have this one thing, and that seems reasonable, and it's also very well defined, right? If the parent container allows for multiple items, then one trailing comma is okay. Multiples are not, and commas anywhere else are still not legal.
Yep. So it's a Boolean.
Are we okay with the name?
So this is this one here, right? All trailing commas. What else do you have on the type right now? Let me actually check.
I just pasted it. It's here.
Where's here?
On the it says JsonReader options. It has this comment handling. That's all it has.
Oh, it literally only has comment handling. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Yep, and it's Boolean whose default is false, so the strict mode is still default is still strict. So
right. This is why I have the cutout in there.
Yep. So yeah, I'm good with it.
All right, and then so the other question was, okay, you just mentioned comments for the sake of it. You're not. It's literally just only about the trailing commas. All right.
Yeah, comments are already in the API.
Yeah, I thought there was some sort of like trailing comment issue or something, but no. Okay, fine. Probably I'm still lacking coffee. All right, then.
So I guess James mentioned an interesting use case as well, which is I have a comma and then I have another property, but I commented it out. So now I have this trailing comma.
Yes.
Yep. I mean, again, that's double illegal according to the JSON.
Yeah.
All right, so then I think we're all in agreement that this is what we want. All right, so we still, I think asking yesterday on IM, this should be fast. So far we used 20 minutes per item. So we get through all three of them.
That is fast, Emo.
Oh, I guess that is fast.
This is tough one.
Usually rejections are easier than approvals, as it turns out. All right. So what is this one about?
So we have lots of .NET types supported in terms of UTF8 JsonReader. Things like GoId, reading a GoId, reading a string, reading a numeric type. What we don't have is supporting DateTime and JsonDocument offset. And this issue mainly wants to encapsulate that the reader, writer, and document should be consistent. And if you're able to write something, you should be able to read it and also get it from the document. So we can write DateTime today, and DateTime is proven to be useful, especially when it changes feedback. So we want to add a try get DateTime and try get DateTime offset along with get DateTime offset on the reader and on the JSON element itself. Now, besides that, there is a question around GUID, which is JsonReader allows writing GUID. Now, in consistency with the goal of having all three types support all consistent types, .NET types, we could consider removing writing GUID support from the writer, or if there's a requirement or ask from customers, which it seems like, at least from the thread, someone asked for it, we want to add it on the reader and element as well. Because here's a GUID string, I know it's GUID, return it as a GUID.
How much would this, like, I mean, GUIDs have a super well-defined string representation, though, right?
Yeah.
They have three super well-defined string representations.
Sure. All I'm saying is that
the .NET GUID parser supports some weird things for the GUID parsing. Like it supports it actually parses each individual thing as its own integer.
Yeah.
So you can have 0x at each of the GUID portion.
But it's not more weird than DateTime.
So, Asim, a question. How are you making a determination as to how much of just a pure JSON tokenizer to leave these types versus something that interacts with .NET primitives that don't have a representation in JSON?
So, in general, the reader only deals with JSON specs. But when it comes to these get.NET type APIs, I've added this on whatever the requirements from the user were, or whatever generally what was most important from the JSON.NET scenario.
So Christoph had brought up that for DateTime, right? He has the memory or span or whatever he has for his UTF8 for the JSON payload. He wants a DateTime, which is a value type. And in order to get it, he has to, in the middle, get the string, which is an allocated reference type, and then parse it himself. So really, right now, to me, it seems like this is the things of we're taking common things that could be zero allocation, and we're making it possible so that you don't have to bounce through string.
Why can't he just get a span of the? Why does he have to allocate a string rather than getting a span and calling UTF8 parser?
Yes, it's true. We can just read the value span himself.
So, I mean, essentially, we can already do a zero allocation.
Yeah.
So
Except for VCAS, because you have to escape.
So he can't off of the JsonDocument because we don't represent, or we don't let you get back to the underlying data because we want to support multiple encodings in the future. That's the JsonDocument is what it came out. From the reader, it's fine. From the document, you can't do it.
So generally, again, the motivation was, here's some things that the writer supports: writing DateTime, writing them offset, writing GUID, and the reader and JSON element don't support getting it back. So we wanted to parity with that. That's the main motivation.
I would think that both GUID and DateTime are common enough primitive values that they would be worthwhile exposing.
Okay.
Here.
So then the question becomes, what about something comes up with time span and URI? From other people's feedback, it has been those are not common enough, and we don't need to support them until there's a strong need. But we should probably codify what is that bar. It's a bar at this point, and we have completed a set with GUID and DateTime, and time span URI on the other side of that bar.
Yeah, I think time span. You can get a time span using DateTime.
Right.
And then for URI, I think that it's probably sufficient that users can do the allocation and get the string back today, and if we get enough feedback in the future, then URI would be
Okay.
added.
Right. So then in that case, we're not removing the GUID support from the writer, but adding GetGUID and try GetGUID on the reader.
Yeah, I think that's my opinion.
Okay.
Again, in documentation, we need to be very clear what formats we're supporting. I know that the writer will have one format that it's going to write. It feels like the reader probably only wants to do that one format, that we want to say this is what we believe the wire format of a datetime and a datetime offset are, and this is the wire format of a GUID, and if you want another format, then write it yourself, and then later if people ask why don't we expose the read a GUID using this format type, then we can add that as we get the need. But I wouldn't add it now, and I wouldn't try all formats.
And probably match what JSON.NET uses for those formats.
Yeah.
Whichever form of GUID it does for that, and whichever form of datetime it does for that.
So for datetime, it's
ISO.
Like round trip, which is with fractional seconds.
Yeah.
Well, he does with fractional seconds with redundant trailing zeros removed, right? Yeah.
This is also something that JavaScript does, which I had feedback from as well. The problem is the underlying UTF8 parser does not support that format. So either something we deviate away from the UTF parser, or we provide some sort of option on the UTF8 format itself and use that instead.
For supporting trailing zeros?
Yeah. Or no, like excluding trailing zeros. Yeah, exactly. For supporting, not for supporting trailing zeros, but for reading data that doesn't contain a string. Because right now it's full exception.
Oh, if you don't know.
Yeah, because looking for exact maps.
Yeah, that seems like something that we should just support because trailing zeros are not significant enough.
Right.
So one question I had is on the writer, we felt it was very important to differentiate what is an actual token versus what's just a convenience overload, right? That's why we said the API name encodes the token type, right? So we have write string, and then there's overloads for all the different kind of strings you can write. On the reader, we don't have that. Do we think that's good? Do we think it's bad?
I don't know if the same context applies to the reader, because we are actually saying, here's GetDateTime, we're saying a datetime.NET type. So we are going from a JSON token to a .NET type already, right, explicitly.
Maybe it should be called getString as datetime, if we're worried about the naming differences there. That way it's clear that we're reading a string and parsing it to a datetime result rather than trying to support a datetime token. Like what if, for example,
similarly with like get number as int32 rather than get int32?
Maybe. Like I think maybe what if JSON in the future adds their own datetime type token? What if they actually add comment support in the future, etc.? Then those are things where we probably want to differentiate between their datetime type and what we're adding now, because I would bet that they don't line up exactly.
So, you shouldn't look at APIs of .NET because it's outdated. At least it's not part of it. If you want to look at the APIs, you maybe want to look at the ref of the syntax JSON.
Yeah, so the reason I look at this, I mean, maybe it's outdated, but I think the one argument you could make is that anything that's prefixed with try kind of implies that somebody has to do some parsing, right? Because if you're standing on a token, there's no reason to call the try API, right? The token type tells you what it is, and any get method will be fine. And so in that sense, you basically, if they ever add their own datetime, then the idea would be we would have GetDateTime value or something, right? And then the try ones are the ones where we parse, right? Would be my guess.
Well, following this is weird. So, following the framework guideline that says if you have a try, you should have a try that outs something, you should have the non-try that returns something and throws. Like, he has both GetDateTime and try GetDateTime. And so, if we expected that JSON was going to add a datetime token type in the future, which doesn't seem very likely, but if they did, then we would not really have a way out of that.
What you want to look for is the ref system.json emo. Does that go up one? Yeah. In the ref,
Yeah.
You get a JSON. The problem with Tanner with your suggestion is we have getString, so it'll be getString as string, or getString as string.
Well, I mean, getString is fine.
Yeah, I think getString in particular is fine. My concern was the cases where we are taking a JSON token type and then converting it to a .NET type.
Yeah. It won't have JSON token name to the .NET.
Yeah.
Right. Now in that case, it will be get number as in 32. Get boolean and get string will remain the same.
Yeah.
It will be get string as GUID, get string as datetime.
Yeah. I also, though, agree with Jeremy that I'm not sure that the JSON spec is going to change in the future.
Yes, that's
so I'm not sure it's worthwhile, but if we were concerned about, and if we wanted the JsonReader names to match the JsonWriter names, then I think that would be a compromise there.
Yeah, except the name becomes so verbose, like try get number as you in 3064. It's a really nice name.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it clear that it's not going to try parsing a string as a number.
Yeah.
That's
fair,
true.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And then you could also, if you wanted, have get string as in 32, etc. if needed in the future. Plus, with tab completion, who cares how long it is?
I guess it's fair.
It also would group together nicely things like get in 32 with get you in 32, because rather than having to find them like that, they'd all be under get number. So it's clear, I have a number token, I'm wanting to get this out of it.
Sort of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be horrible.
But you would keep get string and get boolean.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because those are
Boolean is pretty much a primitive type in JSON.
Yeah, I think both of those are
string is definitely a primitive type in JSON.
Yeah, they're both primitive types that don't require any translation.
And they're semantically remain, you think they're semantically remain consistent with .NET types forever? The issue of evolving spec doesn't apply there.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to add another Boolean value.
Because first someone would need to define a new Boolean value.
And for string, I mean, the worst case we have to do is we have to do encoding translation ourselves.
Yeah.
But
okay. It's interesting that with this API, rename other API comes about. But I like it. Okay.
We still have time to fix them.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, they're definitely a bit wordy. On the other hand, if we do get people who are asking why they have to get the string to parse it as a number themselves, that we could solve the fine. We'll give you get string isn't 32. Like, we could add that as a later wave if we shove the token type between get and the output type.
And
that's true.
If people ask for it later, even though I'm the only one that uses it, as Jeremy likes to say, we could have get string as double, which would support the infinity string and such. And that would allow the differentiation there without having to worry about, what do we name this, and does it make sense with everything else?
Does the same naming apply to JSON element? So get JSON element, you have GetDateTime offset, that type of stuff. Keep in mind that we already had usability concerns around these APIs. So that my concern was, like, semantically makes more sense. They came over about mixed clear, but people are already complaining about the size of these APIs.
Yeah.
On the element at least.
JSON element is for a specific token type already, right?
The token type is one of its properties.
Right. So
not subclass.
So I don't think I think at the same time it would both make sense and not make sense to have on element something called get number as in 32. Because then it would make sense that this particular overload is only valid to the number token type, but at the same time...
But by that logic, the reader has a token type as well.
Yeah, right now, the element names match the reader's names.
So, if you're doing it, we should maybe be consistent.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we get pushed back into the usability of it. Nobody really uses these APIs on the reader, so that's why we don't get feedback at least early on. But we will get feedback on the element, and then that causes that to the title of the reader slider. I mean, reader and document have the same name.
Well, we could provide the reverse names, and if anyone really hates them, that's what extension methods are for.
And people complain that why I'm writing extension methods. But yeah,
I had this conversation right before I went on vacation.
Well, I think the idea of extension methods in that case is not so much that somebody has to write the boilerplate, it's that somebody else can decide what policy they want, right? And then they can shortcut their own policy effectively, right?
Yeah.
So if you want, for example, a get number as in32 that parses from a string, well then write your own.
Well, that would be get string, is it?
So what?
That would be get string is at 32.
Exactly, and you can write it yourself if you want to.
And for JSON element, matching what I proposed for the reader would also make it easy for us to say, if you have a string, then you still have this overload to return like a double if we were to expose it in the future, rather than suddenly having to say, for a string, get double, now no longer throws, now it parses correctly, and does the conversion.
So the only thing is, like, I'm trying to be an advocate of people who are not around for usability, which is the bar for usability already, like, the name is already large, and people are already complaining about it as is. Like, get int32 is like, why am I doing this? It should be a generic type where I just do property.value int, and I get the int. Property.value long, I get the long. This will just make it even harder for us to justify why we don't have to use usability.
I mean, so
this is one direction, but then also provide the usability.
right. So I would say, you know, before we ship right now is the only time we have the chance to insert the token names. I think that inserting the token names is fine, and that in the future we may get requests of, okay, great, now you have get number as at 32, and you have, and then like when someone asks us and we decide we're going to do it, get string is at 32, then we can just also make get at 32, which is I will try every possible option of get in 32. If it's a string, I'll call get string. If it's a number, I'll get a number. If you want to be schema strict, this tells you do like which thing it's doing. But maybe on the elements it doesn't matter. And what we should say is we do the generic for the foofy it does things version. And if you cared about schema, then you would check the type yourself. I don't know which way the right way is to go.
Okay.
But probably, like thinking about it right now, we would either say that we'll go ahead and make the get numeric types also parse a string, and say if you care about conformance, check the type, or we would insert the token name. But if we're inserting the token name in the reader, we need to either be consistent in the element or document why it does a different thing.
Right.
I'm personally always in favor of making the explicitness the default and then providing usability options later.
Right.
Because there's, like, every time I write code, especially with double, single, and anything that has implicit conversions for performance reasons or whatever else, I always get bit in the butt because something's not explicit and then it's calling the wrong overload, and then the code becomes just as verbose but less readable because you have to insert explicit caps to make everything work.
The concern with getString as datetime is things like we have getString which transcodes. GetString as datetime does not transcode. So the user might think like, oh, this API is getting a string and then parsing it as datetime. But it's not.
But it will, as far as they can't tell a functional difference.
Performance or potential allocations, yeah.
No, I mean, the fact that you don't allocate the string, they can't tell that you didn't allocate the string.
Okay, fair.
Like, as long as there's no functional difference, like, this is...
Talk about expectation what the user expects, right? Like, when they see getString, they're like, okay, this thing is allocating a string. Here, when they say getString as datetime, it seems like, oh, you're going to allocate a string as a temporary and then do something else with it to give me a datetime representation back. It just happens to be that that's not what we do. But, okay.
I mean, it's get a string token as a datetime object. Like, the way that happens, whether it's efficient parsing, whether it's allocating a string, whether it's throwing out the sticks of the I-Ching and dividing from them, like that's
an implementation. Get the API as an isolation, saying, oh, this getString at datetime is good. This is going to be next to getString.
Right.
So that's where the mismatch expectation comes
from. That would be an argument for getString as string and getString as UTF8 string.
Right.
But Yeah, I think with the context of having get number and get string, it should be obvious that that's what it's returning.
Okay.
Although I do agree that if we were to expose get string as UTF8 string in the future, we might want to call it get string as string now, as ridiculous.
We'll probably call it as get UTF8 string.
Yeah.
Like you won't call it get string as string, we'll call
get string as UTF-16 string maybe then.
No, but I think that the API will just be get UTF8 string.
Yeah,
that might be confusing from the perspective of then should we also have get UTF8 string as well.
I agree.
I think it's, but maybe that's something we discuss when it comes to.
Levi, what did you say?
I said I generally agree with you on this because if you're getting a string as another data type, like you don't care what the internal representation is because you never see it. So we don't need to get UTF-8 string as blah. Or get string as UTF-8 string. Just get UTF-8 string and then wash your hands of it.
Yeah, I would even argue on that one that maybe get string UTF-8 is a better name for a future UTF-8 string return because it groups it with the token type.
Yeah.
So we can have that argument when we get there.
All right. Seems like we are all more or less in agreement. Anything I need to add to this one?
So I guess the one thing we didn't clear on is, like, if we think that putting a token type in it is important for the reader, should the elements match with the token type, or should all of its things be it will parse from the most appropriate type, and that it becomes the easy to work with thing? If you care about conformance, you check the token type yourself.
I think we should resolve these usability concerns separately, and we should keep them inconsistent.
Okay.
Because people are already not happy with getting in 32.
That also
this is just pushing the bar further. It's not resolving the issue. We have to resolve it separately.
Right. And I think if we, from the get-go, make the UTF-8 or the JSON element be the nice way to use it without the explicit options, we might run into problems later when we start expanding it to support other things, breaking change-wise.
Fair enough.
And that's probably something we want to address.
Seems reasonable. Then I'll leave this as this API approved.
And I guess we were adding GUID and not removing it. But
Yeah.
All right. So then I think we are done with our GitHub triage, which didn't leave much room for anybody else. Thanks, Arson. And so now Levi is on for his stuff. I think in the meeting invite I had a few links, if I remember correctly. Which of course
I can also just give you the work item numbers.
That would be
Are you
super
going to
awesome.
join the meeting, Timo?
Sorry, what?
Are you going to join the different meeting?
One simple question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, convention for specifying that you don't want to specify an int. So, notably in the IoT stuff, it's coming up because people are committing a bunch of things, right? Where you have to specify a pin, right? And you may or may not actually have a pin for something, like for reset or something like that. And they're coming in both ways right now. Like they'll either say -1 not to do it, or do a nullable event. What's the more framework friendly way to be writing things here?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, honestly.
What's that?
I'm not entirely sure, honestly. It seems like a very specific problem.
From what I've seen, we've been doing but I think it's mostly historical. It's been like -1 if you don't want to specify an identifier for something.
Right. I mean, sentinel values is usually the way you would do that, but that has other downsides, right?
Yeah, and clearly that we didn't always have nullable event, so.
I mean, I think generally if negative numbers make no sense, then we usually allow -1 to be the, I don't have an opinion here, do the thing you would have done in the other overload. But sometimes
I want to encourage one way or the other, not pick both. And that's definitely what I don't want to do.
Right.
It's like having a whole bunch of IoT drivers where it's, int and nullable event in different places.
Well, the benefit of using the negative is if it's not valid for anything else, you can also, it's atomic, it's more performant, etc.
Yep.
It's maybe not as nice for future-proofing things if you want to change that value in the future.
Yeah.
Or need to for any reason.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely that you would need to do that to start in this case. But if you have that sort of concern, that would be one thing to like make the argument the other way. So it sounds like that, like in general, we would in this particular case we'd want to like pick the negative convention.
Just as a side, if negative things are out of the range, why are you not putting a UND instead?
Because we never take UND.
Yeah, because nothing in the framework does that, even if it's, more performant and better for, like, every case ever.
Alright. Okay, that's good.
That has some pretty ancient reasons behind it, but it is the way we're set up. So.
Right.
There was just a conversation on GitHub, on Twitter on this. I think it has more to do with usability, honestly, because as soon as you do arithmetic with them, like you count backwards or something, you basically have force to cast, which is why they basically went with int for the most part.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's just quit this call and then we'll join the other call.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
Or we have too many today.
Well, this is good. But
yeah, there are a lot of people on the call.
Yeah.
This room feels very.
Yeah, this is.
Oh, brand new people. Like, this is awesome. Awesome looks very different. Jeremy, I think, switched seats. Should have at least rearranged the conference room somehow. All right, so then, Levi, give me just the issue numbers.
34094.
What are the other ones? Let's just open them all so we know where we are. With
34822.
Okay.
What's and 34826. Sorry?
Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
Are these all?
Those are really the only three I think we would want to do today, yeah.
Sweet. You have 52 minutes. Let's see whether we can get past the first paragraph this time. Yeah.
So, I actually can't see. Can you share your screen?
Oh, yeah. Let me do this.
Is this one streaming or not?
They are still streaming. It's the same stream.
He's still streaming to YouTube.
So how the hell am I supposed to do this? This is awesome. Okay, so let me close this.
There should be a view on if that works.
This is ridiculous. So I moved the Teams window to a separate desktop on Mac, and when you share, you can only share Windows on the same desktop for reasons I don't understand.
So I can also present from my screen because I'm looking on a second screen of your YouTube video. Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah, I finally figured out how to do it.
Yeah. So scroll down 1/3 of the way. You could also search for namespace space system text, and that's what I want to talk about. There. So this is the API surface for the proposed UTF-8 The issue goes into great detail about why this particular data type, such as read-only span of UTF-8 would be more appropriate for representing UTF-8 data than a simple read-only span of byte. I can go into that right now if you want to, but otherwise we could just look straight at the API.
Did we review a set of these data already? And
yeah, when we were in the core FX file.
Yes, we did review them, but what fell out of that review was literally needs work with no feedback.
Okay. All right.
So I need feedback before I can make another iteration on this.
I mean, I can say in general, adding this type will make me happy. Did we already discuss the name of UTF-8 char versus char8 versus whatever the language wants to expose it as, etc.?
I don't think that came up all that much that too. But basically, what this type is, this type is basically imagine it as a primitive integral type, very similar to char, only instead of a UTF-16 code unit, it's a UTF-8 code unit. Huzzah. There are casting operators between all of the primitive integral types and this each way. Some of them are explicit, some of them are implicit. I have written here in the comments that the conversion operators will perform checked conversions. I'm actually thinking I don't want to do that now. The reason for that is if the C# language gets support for having an explicit checked conversion operator, I would rather just use those to do the checked conversions and leave all of these ones regular unchecked operators, just like the existing operators off of other types.
If we're going to, and maybe Steven can correct me if I'm wrong since he's on language design, but I believe if we are going to have language support, we do not want to expose any operators on this type, and we want the language to implicitly add them itself instead. Otherwise, you end up in situations like what we're in with int pointer right now, where they can't expose operators on the int pointer type because it becomes a breaking change.
So I had a brief conversation with Andy about this last week, and I believe that that's not the case here, but let me get back to you on that. Now I'm second-guessing everything I know.
So Tanner, I think the reason, so I think the primary reason why that you want the language to handle conversions was for things like checked versus unchecked, right? Or in cases when you have effectively IL intrinsics for those, right?
Language conversions are also allowed to be used for overload resolution, but implicit operators don't, I don't think. Explicit operators do because you wrote the conversion operation, but I don't think user-defined conversion operations are considered for overload resolution.
They are if there is no overload that takes explicitly the type, the original type.
Yeah,
so I know that there's a weird hierarchy of things that user-defined conversions can't do.
Yeah, I think in general it's less about user-defined. User-defined is more about the primitive types have an order, right? In order to determine betterness when you have a value by the scalar, and then they try to find the one that is more appropriate. So that makes more sense for when you have literals, I guess. And if multiple types would be applicable, but otherwise, I'm not aware of any reason. I think the NPDR discussion was one of those where it has to do with the overflow handling, right? Where we didn't like the overflow handling that the user-defined operators had, and we couldn't add the language-defined ones either.
Well, it's not just that. It's that if there are user-defined operators of any type, and the language wants to add checked and unchecked support, then it's a breaking change for the language to expose those operators, because now a user calling the user-defined operator previously and now calling it from the language support side will get different behavior.
Right.
Only if that code is in a checked block.
Right, but it's still a breaking change, and that's still not something they were willing to make.
I think in this case, though, it's a change that the developer anticipates because the developer explicitly went out of their way to write such a block.
Is that not the opinion last time I talked to Jared and various people on the team? So I think exposing these is fine, provided we also have the appropriate discussion with the language team to make sure that they say it's fine and that any literal support or operator support they add to the language in the future won't conflict.
Yeah, I think there's a general language discussion we need to have about this type, right? Whether we support literals and what they would look like, and whether we need this or not.
Because it's the same discussion we need to have for int 128, uint 128, system.half, bfloat 16. And last time I talked to Jared and Matt, they said they wanted to do all of it at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree with that because it makes it easier. Because then we can reason about this. I mean, this one is a little bit different because the ones you listed are all numeric types. This one wouldn't be a numeric type, so I guess maybe we can have a different conversation with them. But we should definitely bring it up with them and then see where this where this lands. I would hate if we would ship the type now and then box ourselves later for language support. That would be unfortunate.
Well, I think it depends because system.char works as a numeric type in some scenarios.
In very few scenarios. Normally, when system.char works as a numeric type, it's almost always expanded to an int32.
Right, but it's still something that we probably need to consider for this type.
All of the code samples that I wrote using this type's layout work as expected, as far as things like comparisons, arithmetic operators, and so on.
Yeah,
because of that implicit conversion to int32.
Right, but still, we should bounce it off of Jared or whoever to make sure. Because none of these operators at all are defined on char. They're all defined in the language.
Yeah.
And so want to make sure that the compiler team / the language team are happy with this before we commit to it. But since this is the definition in C# this is the definition in C# of things that for char are currently defined in C#. In general, it seems fine modulo language and compiler non.
We'll probably want to talk to, at the same time, Kathleen and Philip about F# and DB if they're going to add support. I imagine F# will.
But I could see us, if we're trying to get this in for 3.0, I could see us having no operators on this guy because maybe we don't need them until there's literal support. But that's just thinking, so don't hold me to that.
Okay. In general, when we have comparison operators, is it A and B or is it left and right? Do we have a guideline for parameter names?
The guideline is left and right, and IntelliSense was recently updated to show left and right for language-defined operators.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, I think I actually got that from somewhere. I just don't remember where.
Well, like every rule, we have or we have conformant things and non-conformant things.
Yeah, we can call them left and right.
Datetime is T1 and T2. Datetime offset is left and right. Decimals D1 and D2.
How are you looking at your number?
I'm in system.runtime.cf. Searching for less than or equal to.
So you guys are nice how to look for operators.
Yeah, Emo should work on that.
I should work on so many things. Yeah. So
yeah, we can call them left and right. It's whatever. I'm not married to the parameter names, right?
So,
do we want this in system.text, or do we think it's going to be common enough that having the system next to char is better?
So all of the other UTF8 support types are in system text and the sub namespaces, and system text is also a default namespace, so I don't think it makes it any less usable being in there.
I think it's a default namespace, but it's not one that typically stays as a namespace that's included.
Is UTF8 string going to go in text, or is it going to go in system?
That, when we were talking about it, we said that would go in system.
Yeah, it feels like the char type should go with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
would generally say wherever the string type goes. Yeah. It seems very weird to not have the char type but have the string type. I could see an argument being made for UTF8 string also not being in system but in system.text. But I think whatever decision we are making there should be consistent. It seems very weird that if you want to enumerate the string, you now have to suddenly add another username. That seems weird. So is this the entirety of the API surface, Levi?
I mean, just the UTF8 char struct itself. Yeah, I mean it's a really simple struct. There are a bunch of APIs that would come along with it, but I don't really want to review those today.
So by the way, the operators are going away because of language support. With the comparison operators also going away?
The comparison operators end up being implemented using the language support.
Okay.
Yeah, currently everything here that has the word operator in it is not defined for char because it is defined in the C# spec.
It's not just defined in the C# spec, it's defined in the IL. Like if we actually wanted to enlighten the .NET framework about this type, it would probably require a change to the IL itself.
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. There's other ways that it could be done, and I talked to Jared a little bit about it for like int 128 and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean.
Basically, it involves what his suggestion was is that we would have either on the type itself or in a special class under compiler services, there would be a IL extensions class of sorts that expose explicitly named methods that the compiler special cases for these new primitive types.
You mean like op underscore less than and op underscore implicit?
Yeah,
which we could just put on the type itself?
Yeah, potentially, but that was basically the rough thing that he had mentioned when I discussed it with him last.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the idea is that the only way you construct these wages is by conversions?
The only way you can construct these is by conversion. So there are three ways to construct them. You can do an explicit conversion from another integral type like int, byte, char, whatever. You can enumerate a UTF8 span or string, and these will be the elemental type of enumeration. Or, assuming language support, you can get it from a literal. By the way, those exact three things I just mentioned are also the only three ways to create system.char today.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think anybody used them up. It just seems odd to have structure with no constructor, but I guess that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah, just like system.char, yeah.
Yeah.
So char has language support, but until the UTF8 char has language support, don't we need something for F# and etc. so they don't have to rely on like the same operators to construct these types?
I think it's something where is this type supposed to ship with 3.0?
Presumably, yes.
The advantage of putting this type in 3.0 is we can go to places right now that take read-only span of byte, where we're saying it's UTF-8 data, and we can replace it with UTF-8 char, and we say this takes UTF-8 character string.
But I don't know if you want to be able to do that without language support.
So
for a char.
So Asan, it's not that F# doesn't support conversions. It's just that they don't have implicit ones. You always have to cast.
Yeah.
Right, but I think Aslan's question was if we're going to end up having the operators be language support because they need to be for whatever reason, then how would F# do it without the same language support?
They would do it like this. It's the same, like there's no fallback for any of the other built-in types either. If we decide this is a built-in type that has language support, there are no operators, then the languages, in order to use the type, have to code it up.
Right, but we would have to check if C# and F# would both be able to fit it in the time frame for the 3.0 release for the language.
Well,
otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do the conversion.
I don't think we really need language support for this, like, to be perfectly honest, considering that the code samples that I have written immediately below this work today without any type of C# changes.
Yeah, I mean, the question is just making sure that the language design team, et cetera, don't have more grand design than using user-defined operators here.
Yeah.
And that if we are going to use user-defined operators, are we accepting that if you have 3.0, it's using user-defined conversions, and when you get to 3.1 with C#9 or whatever, that now it's using built-in conversions and all of these things are dead code, which is just from a retarget of a down level. So we need to make sure that the runtime, the framework, and the language team are all on the same page regarding this. I think that the shape of the stuff, modulo A/B turning into left-right, looks reasonable, but we need to make sure that we're not. There are three aspects to system, and we need to make sure that all three of them are happy with each other.
Okay.
Like the namespace system vector system.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I would say is, like, it's not that all languages have to ship support in 3.0. Like, I think if we can nail the design with the C# team, it's okay if potentially even none of them ship, as long as we're all in agreement about what that design is. I mean, if you have no language support and the only way you can use these wages is with language support, then I don't think it makes sense for us shipping the type in 3.0 either, right? But if there is a way you can use the type, it's just more convenient with language support, then I think it's also okay if that comes later, so long we know enough about the design to know that we didn't corner ourselves with what we're shipping.
Well, the reason that this type is important for 3.0 is that, like, a span of this is how you represent UTF-8 data as opposed to a span of byte. Like, we don't want to ship 3.0 with a bunch of APIs where we expect our developers to pass read-only span of byte as the exchange type for textual data.
But we already did that in 2.1. You're saying
you want to stop doing it. We don't want to propagate it, yeah.
You are also, just as a note, missing some operators here that C# supports on char. Plus
okay.
double decimal.
Conversion operators.
Yeah, conversion operators.
You said operators. I looked at the
Equality. Yeah.
Boolean operators.
Sure.
There are a bunch of static methods on char, like, is lower, to lower, all that kind of stuff. Were those looked at and dismissed or not considered?
So those don't necessarily make sense on UTF-8 char because UTF-8 char in isolation is really just an ASCII byte. All of the APIs that you just mentioned already exist as static methods on the system text rune type.
So, but members like compare make sense here?
Compare makes sense because you might want to do something like if this UTF-8 char is between lowercase a and z, stuff like that.
Well, isn't that the purpose of the is lower method? That's just a is lowercase a through z check.
Not necessarily, because if you're iterating through a string and you get a UTF-8 char which happens to be a partial code unit, or it happens to be a code unit of a value which is only representable by a longer sequence, that code unit in isolation is completely meaningless. You can't ask anything about it. But as a member of a larger sequence, only then does something like is upper make sense.
But doesn't that same argument apply to compare to?
For UTF-8 char?
Yeah.
As a code unit, it is an integral value, and integral values can always be compared against each other.
Okay, but I would never actually use it.
You could. Well, aside from if you wanted to do something like ask, is this UTF-8 char like a C0 control character? Like, yes, you would use something like a comparison for that. I think most of the time you would probably compare it as an int.
Because the place where too lower doesn't work, for example, would be you have a lowercase math space a. That's a multi-byte value in UTF-8. And if you're looking at the first byte, it could be lower, it could be upper, it could not even be a letter, depending on what the next 7 bits are from the second byte.
The first one in that case would clearly be the special byte that says I've got more bytes.
Yeah.
But then what do we return?
But the second byte would be the one where it could be an A, but when considered with the rest of it would be invalid.
So they would need to know what the previous bytes were in order to. So with UTF-8 char cheats in that, like, what most people encounter most of the time fit within a char until they get surrogates and then their application gets destroyed.
All of the char static APIs operate on UCS2 data, not UTF-16 data. And UCS2 data is defined to be a 16-bit char is the end of the world. Like that's all there is in the world.
Yeah. So putting them on UTF-8, it works for all the ASCII things and then immediately falls apart. And so it's probably better to not have them and to make you cast through Rune. But anyway, so for the how do we get one of these objects? If the only thing we get in 3.0 is that you use unsafe as to turn your read-only span of byte and your read-only span of UTF-8 char, that at least pleases me more than painting the APIs forever with byte.
Yeah, it wouldn't be unsafe, but yeah, we would provide an API to go back and forth. Just a simple casting API.
So I think the only other comment I would have then is we may want to consider talking with the language team and changing the name from UTF-8 char to whatever they use or something similar to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, char 8 is what people use quite frequently. Like I'm fine with that.
I would be in favor of char 8 from the perspective of most other languages use it, and it would group it together with the existing char.
Yeah.
And match the semantics we have for like int32, etc.
I like char 8 as well.
Char 8 seems good for the keyword, which is fine. It's just a question of vocabulary. It also makes sense for the Pascal case type. The word short is int 16, right? Like the keyword and the type don't always match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think for char in particular, char 8 indicates it's an 8-bit character we want it to be used as... No.
8-bit character would be ASCII. This is an 8-bit character segment.
Well, so the reason that I originally didn't call it char. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying it's an 8-bit character that we intend to be used as UTF8, but a user could use it for interop with ASCII, use it for ASCII data, etc. So
they shouldn't, but they could.
They shouldn't, but they could, and they likely will, regardless of what we tell them, because it's the same type that represents an 8-bit character, and therefore is useful for that purpose.
The reason that I say they shouldn't is because if you have an array or a span of these things, like we want to be beating into people's minds. Like if you have an array or a span of these, it represents UTF-8 data. So use this only as a code unit of UTF-8 data, not as ASCII data.
Well, treating it as ASCII is still valid for UTF-8. It's only when you have UTF data, if you interpret it only as ASCII, that it becomes invalid.
Yes, that's true. And the same thing exists for UTF-16 and UTF-2. So,
for example, I imagine that people will want to use this type for conversion to ANSI data or ASCII data on older Unix APIs for interop purposes.
I don't think that's a good idea because all of the conversion APIs will assume UTF-8 because it's a span of char8, span of UTF-8 char, and at that point you might end up with data corruption.
The marshaller will see it as an 8-bit struct unless we have explicit support for it otherwise.
We'll have to for Windows because we'll need to convert it to UTF-32 or UTF-16 probably. Yeah. I mean, we need to find what the marshaller would do. But
like, if you had a struct that contained a UTF-8 char, and
that's a standalone as a field, you mean?
Yeah, if you just had it as a field in the struct, or even as a parameter in a method, and you marshaled that.
Oh yeah, it's a byte. Yeah.
It would be treated as a raw byte, and therefore a char8, and there would be no meaning of UTF-8. And the same for if you have a fixed size buffer of it, etc.
I mean, that's the same as saying char and short are the same type. But it's for 7-bit ASCII, UTF-8 and C char are the same. Once you hit the 8-bit ASCII, then the universe falls apart. Yeah. So saying that this is also saying that this is also an ASCII string means that once you pass this sequence into UTF-8 string, it would say this makes no sense because I'm getting byte segments that are not legal.
Right. You wouldn't be able to treat it as 8-bit ASCII.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so it sounds like we're generally okay with the type existing, but we need to go back to we just need to have a quick conversation with the language team and say, hey, what are the plans regarding first-class support for this?
We should probably also talk with the runtime team on marshalling behavior. That way it doesn't become a breaking change to introduce correct marshalling behavior later if we need to.
Okay.
I also still have some minor concerns. It shouldn't prevent it from happening, but some minor concerns around memory of this. Same issue we've talked about before around if data's coming in as the memory of byte, how does that interplay with APIs that work in terms of memory of UTF-8 char? Yes.
Yeah, and we can talk offline because I've given some thought to that, and we should just talk offline because I think we have a workaround. What I want to run it by you.
Okay.
So is your feedback now, and Nemo, what's the plan then?
Yeah, so I was just writing up all the things you just brought up. So I think there's a bunch of open issues, right? So first of all, we need to decide if we want or need language support, including built-in conversions. If so, we can't ship user-defined operators. Should the API be in system text, we probably want to align this choice. Wherever we'll think we will want to ship the UTF-8 string type. How should we name the type? We probably want to align this choice with the UTF-8 string support and language support. Does this type need consideration for marshalling? So it seems like, I think in general, nobody seems to have a concern with the UTF-8 char type in general, module the thing Stephen just brought up. But I think, to me, the biggest value prop of this type is what we said earlier, namely that we can finally differentiate our payload, so it's not just all read-only span of byte, and then you have to read the comments. And it seems like, at least from what I've heard when I talk to people, that everybody seems to buy into that value prop at least. So it seems a type that we should definitely consider for closing. Now, my only concern is, like, is this something we want to do for 3.0? Because the question is, can we close on the other things in time? Like, do we know whether we can get language support? If so, do we know enough about the design to make decisions? Same with UTF-8 string type. Like, I feel like we cannot completely decouple this type from the UTF-8 string type discussion. Otherwise, later on when we ship it, I don't want to have this, square peg in a round hole problem. Nothing fits together. That's my only concern. So it's more like timing, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
So I think, this week will probably not happen much. Depending on how the weather goes, but we should probably set up something with the language folks next week to discuss what this would look like.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any specific concerns? The marshalling ones to me is more like, I think this seems something that is very additive, right? If we don't nail this now, we can easily nail this later, probably.
I think it's a question of, I just should have the discussion with the runtime team to make sure that whatever marshalling support they add there won't break users later.
Yes.
Because people, as soon as the type's available, people are going to start using it. People have been wanting it for a very long time, so I don't think there's any question there. And as soon as people start depending on the behavior, whatever we ship it as, it's probably one of the types where we can't just go and change it later.
That's fair. So I added that to the list. Anything else? Because then otherwise I would mark this API for now as needs work, and then say next step is language discussion.
Okay.
Are you okay with that, Levi?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's clarity, right? All I really needed was clarity on where to go from here. And everything else in this, like all of the other sample APIs at the bottom of the issue, we're not going to discuss right now, because those are mainly things like extension methods that take this and so on. That take spans of this, rather.
Sounds good. Let me just add this to the milestone list for 3.0, so we keep coming back to this puppy.
Yeah.
All right, so we have 22 minutes left.
That should be enough time.
That goes into the book of famous last words, but yeah.
Yeah. So we have we added methods to string for 3.0. String.getRuneAt as an instance method, and it takes an index as a parameter and returns the rune that's at that position. One of the things that API does is it will, in the case of failure, it will either throw an exception or it will just return false if you use the try variant. There are a few things about that to note. First, it's only on string. It's not on read-only span or anything else. And the second, like I said earlier, it doesn't tell you why something went wrong. It just says, I can't give this to you. This particular method is something that would be used by the iterators and by people who need to know exactly why decoding couldn't work. And this would tell you, hey, give me a span, and I will give you back the first rune that I saw from that span. If I can't return a rune to you, I'm going to tell you explicitly why I wasn't able to give one to you, either because the input was too short, or the input was corrupted, or I was able to give one to you. So we would be using 3 of the 4 operation status return codes here. Sequence length is basically chars consumed or UTF-8 chars consumed. This is an operation status returning API. The thing that makes it a little different than the existing APIs is that it outs a result rather than writing the result to a buffer, like a standard operation status would. The reason reason you would need to know the difference, by the way, between the data was invalid and the data was incomplete is because if you're writing the transcoder, for instance, you would use this as an implementation method, and when you're eventually approaching the end of the string, the decode method would say, I cannot give you back a result because I need more data. Now the transcoder would then return needs more data back to its caller, again, using this effectively in a loop as a workhorse method.
Sorry, Levi, did you say that we added existing methods and these are like augment those to provide the same info but more? Or did I miss it?
These are different than the ones on string in two ways. A, these operate on span, and B, these are guaranteed not to fail. They'll actually tell you why they couldn't succeed.
Didn't we also have ones on extensions on span?
The extensions on span aren't yet in. They're in the next review because they have a different return type.
Do we need them both?
The extensions on span return enumerators, but they don't return very specific information about what went wrong and why. Like the ones on span just return the question mark within the diamond replacement character if something goes wrong, but they can't be used for determining like, oh, I need to do my own custom replacement, for instance.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're basically saying that the methods on string and the extensions on span are sort of the higher level usable APIs for enumerating the content. They would both be built presumably on top of this, which is more complicated but provides all the functionality.
That's a much more eloquent way to state it, yes.
Okay. Got it.
So yeah, give me the first rune, give me the last rune. That's what these APIs are. And there's the UTF-16 and the UTF-8 equivalent.
The enumerators then, would they actually be built on top of this? Like they would say, give me the first rune, and then they would splice to get to the remainder?
Exactly.
Okay.
What does last do if the last byte starts a non-valid rune? Like in UTF-8, where you see that it's the start of a multi-byte, does it go backwards and find the last legal one, or does it just tell you the last one can't be decoded?
It will tell you I can't decode the last one because I'm out of data, but here are how many bytes I found that have the potential to be followed by more valid data.
Okay, so if you have a 4-byte UTF-8 sequence and you're at the first one, it would say, fail, I read 1 byte.
Correct. It would say fail because I need more data. By the way, I see 1 byte. Yes.
Okay.
And Levi, where is this rune type exposed from? So I can find it.
It's in system text.
Which reference memory though?
System runtime.
I couldn't find it. Okay.
Let me double check APIs. I've done that real fast.
So I was just wondering around the sequence length name.
Yeah, system runtime.
Confusing to me. If you want the name to be sequence length, and did we have another concept already for like rune code point count or something else? I mean, if you want to use that.
So this sequence length in this regard means code unit count. For the UTF-16 version, it's how many chars did I consume. For the UTF-8 version, it's how many UTF-8 chars did I consume. We can call it whatever we want to, though, but that's the meaning of the parameter.
I feel that our convention right now is things consumed, so chars consumed and chars consumed for the other one. But like when a thing's reading bytes, we usually have the out be bytes consumed.
Yeah, well, it's not reading bytes. Haha.
Yes, indeed. I was just saying sequence length is not the normal convention.
Right.
And I believe we use consumed instead of read, because that's what we do.
Okay.
Or in fact, on the rune, we have UTF-16 sequence length and UTF-8 sequence length.
Yes. Yes, those are current public properties hanging off of Rune.
Which is a little odd why we call them sequence length, but it's fine, I guess.
Because it's less verbose than code unit count. Actually, I guess it's more characters, so never mind.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we might want to come back to that one and fix it.
Yeah, that would be an easy change to make. It's just naming.
Yep.
So maybe I'm just slow. I still don't understand how you use this API from high-level APIs. So you call decode first rune in a loop?
Basically, yeah. So if you're enumerating over a span of rune, you would just call this in a loop and keep slicing over and over and over.
So why would I ever need the last one then?
Decode last rune?
Yes.
Either reverse enumeration or more commonly when you're doing a trim operation. Because say that you want to trim all like, I don't know, you want to trim all accented E characters from a string, both the first and the last. Well, reading UTF8 data backward is a non-trivial process.
I see. So is it then fair to say that decode first rune reads left to right and decode last rune kind of reads right to left then?
For the most part, yeah. Decode last rune has a lot of logic inside of it to figure out if there's a partial character at the end, and if so, to kind of escape eagerly. But yeah, otherwise it's a right to left thing, yeah.
Should we then maybe rename the methods? I mean, at least for me, it wasn't clear that this is what you would do.
We could.
Like decode from beginning and decode from end or something. I don't know. Seems more. I think either way, like it's not clear that you're supposed to call this in a loop, but I guess that's just the way it is. I mean,
yeah.
I can't think of a better name that would address that part.
So the behavior of decode last rune is such that whatever it returns, if you take the outed sequence length, trim the original span to that sequence length, and then turn around and call decode first rune, they should return the exact same results.
Right.
Basically, find the penultimate rune, slice the input to that, and then do a forward read from there. Which is weird, but it's the only way to make this work.
So decode last string effectively looks at most 4 characters back from the end to determine if there's any control digits that say I have more digits than otherwise, it just returns 1.
Correct.
And for the char one, am I at a surrogate? Because the previous guy might be a surrogate.
Yeah.
So decode from start, decode from end. Is that what you had in mind, Emo?
Yeah, that seems more logical, at least for me, because otherwise it seems like, I don't know.
You should also call it get instead of decode.
Yeah, but other APIs do you have on Rune?
String has string.getRuneAt. And we don't really have static factories on Rune right now.
Does the char overload need to differentiate between big endian and little endian in the case where it's a partial surrogate at the end and the previous one, and then the previous character is also a full surrogate?
No, it's UTF8's always big endian.
No, for the char overload.
No, the char overloads take the you mean the span of char overloads?
Yeah, our char is our char is char. We don't talk about the Indian order.
The individual code units are always in machine Indian order, but the sequence, the high surrogate always precedes a low surrogate.
Even in big Indian systems?
Yes, all systems.
It's only 2 byte twist, not 4 byte twist.
Yeah.
It's the final shorts, not long, or not.
Right. Oh, okay, yeah.
Because if you have a sequence of 16-bit integers, the element at index 0 has to be the high surrogate. The element at index 1 has to be the low surrogate. And the individual elements are stored in machine endian order, but the indexes that I just mentioned have to be high and low in that order.
Okay.
I mean, the other
And
option
the
is
rest of this is just examples of what it returns.
the other option is like, do you think people like is it like how common is decode last rune versus decode first rune? Is it fair to say most people would use decode first rune?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Should we then just go with what we did for index off, just call the first one decode and then the last one maybe just decode from end or something? Because I think decode kind of makes sense to me that you would call that in a loop if you only return one rune at a time.
Sure, yeah. The only concern I have with that is the method name should kind of signal that it's not going to read the entire sequence. It's only going to give you the first element from the sequence.
Oh, I see.
Think that span of stuff and you decode it to a rune, it clearly can only do one of them. So if it's decode and decode last, then that would.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're saying
that's
rune
something for
decode.
documentation too.
I think as soon as you try to call the API, it will be kind of obvious because you only get a single value out, so it will be hard pressed to get a whole stream out of it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's okay. Yeah.
Should we name the span parameter to source?
Sure. Okay. I think the reason I called it span is because a lot of the memory extensions methods just take their input as span, but yeah, source works too.
Aren't those also extension methods? So the name of this member doesn't really matter?
They can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they can't be, right? Because the type itself is not static.
Yeah. And I didn't really want to make these extension methods hanging off of read-only span because I think this is going to be a somewhat more esoteric scenario, and I don't really want to pollute the standard extension method namespace.
Yeah, who?
Okay, so let me just type this in and see what people think. Oh God.
And instead of sequence length, what was the recommendation?
Charge consumed or something consumed?
Sure.
I was just like, that's what our current convention seems to be. Mostly we have only done things with bytes and chars, so we've used bytes consumed and chars consumed.
We can call them both chars consumed. Especially if the source type is UTF8 char or char8. I mean, char's in the name.
Yep.
It's just now we need to be careful that chars consumed doesn't necessarily mean system.char. It means whatever char you happen to pass in, the number of elements we consumed from that sequence.
I think that's kind of fine. I mean,
Okay.
that only means that whatever we call UTF8 char, it better has char in the name somewhere.
Sure. Which I think we're all in agreement on we want to do anyway.
Yeah, if we call it like ASCII value or something, then we're screwed.
Just going back to the UTF8 char discussion, if we are going to name this one chars consumed because it takes UTF8 char, and we're going to close UTF8 char for 3.0, and fix all the APIs that are taking span of byte to take span of UTF char instead, are we also going to make sure that we update all of the ones that are bytes consumed to be chars consumed there?
If we don't forget it, yes.
Changing the word byte to UTF8 char will show up in the def, and we look at it and be like, why does it say bytes consumed?
In that case, we will call this UTF8 chars consumed explicitly, and not overload the chars name. Really.
Too.
Either way. I mean, this is the name of the out parameter, so can you even do named parameters on an out parameter?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
Okay.
I do it all the time.
Fair enough.
All right, is that the shape that we're all in agreement with? Did I represent everything fairly, or did I mess it up?
The only thing I would push back on is chars consumed should be UTF8 chars consumed.
I think we should wait and determine what the language name is for.
Yeah. Whatever it may be, but it will be different from chars.
Yeah.
So maybe we can at least have a to-do then.
Yeah.
Or I guess not with a language name, but what we expose.
If the keyword, like if we get a keyword called char8 on it, I don't think that we would call it char8 consumed, because that would just look stupid. So
it's more closely bytes than char, so I don't know. I don't want to call it char consumed. You know, the API can take the only sign of char when they met char8 when they went from 0 to 1.
So the real answer might be that maybe we need to sit down and have a discussion of what we think that the out names on these should be, and maybe the T's consumed is not actually the shape that we want, but we haven't done that. We've done everything piecemeal.
So there was a recommendation in YouTube chat to maybe call it consumed count. That way it's just an elemental count. What do people think of that?
I mean, I think it's okay, but probably we probably want to talk to Christoph, because really that's deciding what we think the convention should be for all span-based consumption.
Okay.
And so I'd want his opinion before we commit to anything.
Okay.
But I think that's very reasonable, and it gets us out of describing the T.
Yeah.
So we may want to keep the consumed as he's saying may consume.
But it's consumed count consumed, items consumed, that's fine. But if we can get the T, if we can decide that our convention is to not have the T in the name, that seems a lot friendlier, especially once we start getting off of our 4-letter primitive type names. And it's like, oh, you're decoding this to a 11-letter long type. It's like, do you really take the type name?
I think that
camel-case the type name and then put consumed on the end.
Right. Like if this was an array of int32, we probably wouldn't call it int32 is consumed.
Yeah. But would we say int consumed, or would we just say maybe the parameter should just be called consumed?
Yeah, we have to
I'd say it would be int32 consumed. If we
Great.
As the person who's going to write this chapter, I can tell you we have written 0 words as to what the parameter on this
yeah. But just going for the framework design guideline can
And the remaining APIs I wanted to review, we'll just push off till next time. Maybe we can do a review like Thursday or Friday if the weather holds up and people can handle it.
Friday might be difficult because of the all hands.
That would do it. Okay.
Yes.
What's the next APIs? Can we quickly glance at it, Timo?
So this was
Glance quickly.
What in the world?
This was enumerating over a span, as was mentioned earlier, I think by Steve. When you're enumerating over a span, we decided that we wanted additional enumeration APIs that would allow you to deconstruct the elemental type of enumeration into the rune and its index in the span that you were enumerating over. We reviewed this a while back. I had a link up to it, up to the original review. This is just responding to feedback from the original review. Again, we don't have time to get into this today, so whatever. But
I have a favor to ask, which is we've sort of been reviewing all the rune stuff piecemeal. Yeah, which is fine, but and everything we've reviewed probably serves its own unique purpose and so on, but it'd be great if prior to shipping and still with time to make changes, we could sort of look at the high-level picture again and validate that there isn't unnecessary duplication, that we couldn't consolidate certain things in various ways and so on.
No, that's good feedback. Are you talking about from an API perspective or behavior or what?
All of the above, but I was in particular thinking APIs.
Okay.
I mean, we did something similar before span shipped as well. So we could do, we should probably do the same thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic idea. It should be a relatively easy diff to do, I would think. Emo, I imagine I could probably pick your brain as to how to get that diff running.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
okay.
As I said, like I think I sat down like last week or whatever. I sent out a schedule with all the upcoming API reviews. We can just see where we can fit this in and how much we need to close on those. All right, then if there's nothing more, I would say enjoy the rest of your day. Don't drive too crazy to traffic, and then I hope I will see you tomorrow in person again.
Yes. All right. You all have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye, YouTube.